This is Mr. S. You may remember me from work such as your technology class yesterday. Today we're going to talk about what happens when you need to take your idea for your solar car and turn that into a top view. So what we're going to do is we're going to model what it looks like to create a top view of this solar car right here. Now, this is just a simple design that we selected so that we can demonstrate how you're going to want to approach drawing your solar car, and we're always going to start from the top view. So we're going to take a few breaks here and there just to get some tools. So when we get back, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and write a border on our drawing. So just like all the other drawings that we've learned about, we're going to start out by drawing a border on our paper, and that's going to do a couple of things. It's going to give us a nice starting point to make sure that we have space for the rest of our car. It's also going to allow us to have some of our lines already drawn. You see I've created my border using a T-square and a triangle, and what that's done is that has actually given me this bottom edge of the car right here, and then this back edge of the car that extends upwards here. So now that we have our border, if I actually look at this day-by-day portfolio breakdown, it's going to be much easier for you to just follow along and read it while you go. It gives me basically the 6 steps I need to create my top view. And as I said, we're going to be creating a model of the top view of this car right here. So the first step says to draw a base, which is most likely a rectangle the size you want your car. So unless your car's base is something other than a rectangle, you're going to start off by drawing a rectangle, the size of the entire piece. You'll notice that I don't see the entire base here because I have this part covering it, but what we're going to do is we're going to imagine that we have X-ray vision and we can actually see through the top of that and down to the bottom, because it's going to be really important that we can see through this, because that's going to tell us all sorts of important information such as the location of our gear slot, the location of our motor, as well as our battery pack. And with our super strong X-ray vision, we're also going to imagine that we can see all the way through the bottom, so we know the location of our bearing, because that's going to be really important. That's the first thing we glue on. So we're going to draw as if we can see through this roof here, and then we'll come back to that later. So this is a 9x5 base, and it is a rectangle, so I'll start by drawing a 9x5 rectangle. I'm going to pause it while I do that because you do not need to see how to draw a rectangle. So you'll see that we have this 9x5 rectangle, and that's the full size of the car. So if I were to actually place my car on top of that rectangle, it would be the same exact size. Of course, the wheels are sticking off the sides a little bit. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to put the bearings on. We're not going to actually have to draw the bearings. I don't want you to draw anything that you're not building. So we're just going to indicate with a line where we will be gluing our front and rear bearing. On this car, the bearings are not even. They are 1 inch from the back and a ½ inch from the front. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and 1/2 inch it from the front of my car and 1 inch from the back of my car. I'm going to go ahead and draw some dotted lines so that I know where I'm going to glue the bearings when time comes to actually build this car. While I do that, I'm going to pause that, and when you come back, you'll see some lovely bearings. Next, we're going to draw the location of the gear slot. You'll notice that no matter what car you look at, the center of your gear is always located in line with the bearing. So we need an opening extending back from the bearing as well as forward from the bearing to allow the gear to fit through and rotate and make the car go. So here's where we're going to start to do some tricks. You'll notice that this has a large gear. This is geared to generate the most power possible to move the mass of this car. And the key is that we need to have enough space side to side as well as for the length of the gear for it to fit. So I'm going to show you a trick that's going to prevent us needing to do a lot of measurements by using actual parts to mark up our car. So here's a large gear. There are some gears slightly larger than this. A good strategy would be to actually go ahead and draw your gear slot large enough to fit the largest of gears. That way, if you need to make any adjustments to your transmission, you can go ahead and do that as you need to and not have to cut pieces while the wheels are on the car. So I know that the center of my gear is always going to be located on the bearing line. So if I put it right there, I know it's going to extend at least this far forward and at least that far back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little further forward than the gear, and I'm going to make a mark. And then I'm going to stand the gear up, and I'm going to mark it just a little bit wider on each side to make sure that that gear would not rub against the chassis of my car. So what I'm going to do, I have 3 spots now, and I'm just going to connect those dots to make a gear slot. So here's our gear slot right here. It's important that you remember that even though I'm modeling just how to draw a car that I have in front of me, this design is coming from your mind. So the location of this gear slot is really up to you. If your bearings are further forward, your gear slot's going to be closer to the middle of the car. If you want your gear slot off to the left or the right for some reason, that is completely fine. You are deciding and making these decisions because this is ultimately what you'll build. Remember, we're going to be gluing something here, we're going to be cutting something here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use our battery pack and our motor to do the same thing we had done with the gear slot. And again, we're going to kind of cheat. Instead of going and getting the measurements of this, now keep in mind from the top of this motor, in 2D, we're not going to be seeing a circle. We're only going to be seeing the rectangular width and the rectangular length of this motor. The same is going to be true of that battery pack. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to place them where we want them. We know that the shaft of our motor needs to go over our gear slot so that they can connect. If I have a pulley, I would offset it to the front a little bit to give room for that rubber band to stretch. We're going to assume that we're using gears for this car, but pulleys work the same way. We're simply going to mark the sides, the front, and the back of our motor. That's going to be right there. And then we're going to do the same thing with where we want our battery pack. It could be here, it could be here, it could be anywhere so long as you have it so that your wires will reach your motor. And these wires are quite long, so you don't have to worry too much. Just for the sake of ease, I'm going to mark the 4 corners of it right here where I want it on my car. I'm going to connect those dots, and when we come back, we'll have a battery pack and motor on our car. So you'll see right here and right here, we now have the location of the battery pack and the motor. If we wanted to, we could neatly label that. If not, we don't have to. Remember, I'm not concerned, and nor is anyone else, with exactly how beautiful they look. The reason we're drawing this is so that we know when it comes time to build, we know exactly where on the car we're going to be gluing these objects. The other thing we want to be really careful of is that we are always drawing everything in full size, and there's a simple reason for that. If I draw everything in full size on the paper, such as my battery pack, I know when I go to build, everything's going to fit on my car. That way, if I ask you, does the can fit on your car? What I can do is I can come right up to your drawing and say, yep, can fits. Because if you draw it in full size and the can does not fit, that means when you build it in full size, the can is not going to fit either. So here we are, we're at this point where we are actually going to go ahead and we're going to draw how we hold the can, how we hold the solar panel. This is a little bit more difficult because now it's not the same for everyone. You'll see on this car right here, what they've done is they have a wall going across right here, and they also have a little bit of a windshield here. We're going to indicate with lines where those start and end. We're not drawing the can. Actually, the can fits right in this opening. So as long as that opening is an appropriate size, the can is going to fit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some measurements, and when we get back, we're going to draw the top view. So we're now at the point where we need to draw where this wall starts and ends. We know that this wall starts even with the back, so we're not going to need to draw anything there, but we will need to measure forward and draw a line indicating here where it stops and drops off. We're not going to see that drop off in the top view, but when we look at the side view of that material, we are going to see where it drops off. So you'll notice that I've been extending all my lines all the way up. We're going to continue to do that. That's going to make our life a lot easier when we do the side view. So this is 3.5 inches right here, and from the starting point to where this line comes across the top view for the windshield is 2 inches. So I'm going to measure 2 inches from the front, 3.5 from the back, and I'm just going to draw a line across to indicate that that is where those pieces stop. So you see I have a line here and a line here, and what those represent, if we actually look at our car from the top view, is those represent the point at which this line stops coming across and this line stops coming across. You'll also see that I included here these 2 really narrow rectangles. Those represent the thickness of the walls. If you are just drawing and you know you have plenty of size, that's not as important, but it is something you may want to include. For a car like this, it's really important that you do draw the thickness of the walls, because the thickness of the walls has a large impact on whether or not the can fits, because that has a nice snug fit. So we have this rectangle drawn, and that's right here in this region. And we have this rectangle drawn, that's right here in this region. And the opening right in here is where my can fits. And it doesn't look like it fits. However, we don't see the side view that this line right here is raised up above our can, allowing it to fit. So, next thing we need to do, and it's actually the final thing on the top view, is this solar panel. How are we holding it? You'll see this one has an adjustable arm. It has a rectangle up here. It has these arms down here. So I need to know two things on my drawing. I need to know where this is being placed. Is it to the left, to the right, or in this case in the center, which is a good design decision. And I also need to know how big this piece is. So now we're going to get to the point where when we draw, we're going to be drawing on top of things we already drew. For example, this is going to be over our motor and battery pack, and that's all right because right now we're only drawing in 2D. So when we draw the side view, we'll see that in fact this rectangle is not actually sitting on top of the motor and battery pack, but it's actually above them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to measure those, and I'm going to draw it. I'm going to show you that that would be the last step in our top view.